Welcome back. This is going to be the third and final video in the Adirondack chair series. In this video I'm going to show how I assembled the chair. I'm going to give you some recommendations for preventing some errors, and I'm going to end up with a wrap-up of the series. What I'm not going to show here is the finishing of the wood. I figured you guys don't need to waste your time watching someone brush finish on wood, so that won't be seen. The first step in the assembly of this chair is to attach the lower rear cross piece to the two side members. You should make sure you orient the side members with the front away from you or to your left. The front is identified by the 24-degree angle of the cut on that end, while the back is identified by the 66-degree angle on the other end. And there are also several points to watch for when completing the step. First, as I just mentioned, orient the front pointing away from you or to your left. Second, make sure that the open end of the curve of the lower rear cross piece is open towards the front of the chair. Remember, this is where the bottom of the back slats are going to be attached later on. And third, with that in mind, ensure that the 6-degree angle of the bevel on the edge of the curved part is facing upwards. This bevel is going to align with the 30-degree bevel on the upper rear cross piece and ensure that the back slats lie flat against the supports when they're attached to them. Fourth, and this part really blew my mind when I was doing the assembly on the prototype earlier, the width of that flat space on top of the side members where the cross piece is going, that width is 4 inches exactly. But the width of the cross piece is slightly less than 4 inches. And I couldn't figure out if I had miscut a piece or how the spacing should go. There was no reference to it in the narrative of the article or the assembly instructions that I had. However, in the cut diagram, it provides a note that the back edge of the cross piece should rest even with the back of the flat space on the side member. And as a side note to that, that's also where the instruction is for cutting the 6-degree angle on the front of the cross piece. That's where it's also hidden right there in that diagram. So just be aware, if you use the same reference to build your chair that I did, there are a few details to look out for outside of the written instructions. You can see the process that I'm using here to glue and screw the pieces together. I've always had a difficult time with pieces of wood slipping and sliding around once I apply glue to both pieces. I can never seem to get them to line up perfectly when they are glued, and then they get out of square when I screw them together. So to prevent this from happening here, I do a dry fit with clamps, and then I drill a pilot hole on the edge of the bottom piece. Remember, I've already drilled the pilot hole and the countersink on most of the other pieces earlier. And then what I do is I run the screws partially into the bottom piece, and I do that in order to establish precise guides for where the screws are going to go. Then I remove the screws, apply a liberal amount of glue to the joints, and screw the pieces together, relying on the screw holes to guide the pieces together without any slipping. Now, this is just my process. I'm not recommending that everybody do this. It's just what I use to make up for a problem I seem to always have. If you use enough glue, and you'll always have some glue squeeze out. And what I do is I always keep a bucket of water, warm water, and a cloth there next to me so that I can use that to wipe off the squeeze out. That does raise the grain a little bit. Remember, we've sanded this to 120 grit in the drum sander, but it really doesn't matter because we're going to come back with 180 grit anyhow and resand that before we put the finish on. So you'll see me right there. I'm going to go ahead and use a liberal amount of water to wipe off that squeeze out. And that process worked well for me because I didn't have any glue squeeze out showing when I got done building the chair. And then once you get done with with one side, then you just go ahead and move on to the other side using the same process and make that connection there as well. The next step is to fasten the front cross piece to the front of the two sides. And Again, remembering that the front part of those sides is the part with a 25-degree angle. Something you want to watch, take care of here, as you see in the video, I'm taking great pains to make sure that the top of that cross piece is flush with the top of those side pieces. The cross piece is a little bit wider than the 25-degree angle is, and so you'll have an overhang, and you want to make sure that overhang is pointed towards the bottom when you assemble those pieces together. Now, when you're attaching the legs, you have to make sure that several things line up. You have to make sure, first of all, that those legs are absolutely flush with the front of that cross piece that we just put on. You have to make sure that your chair is sitting flat. I've had my chair, I think you can see here, I have my chair sitting on a piece of MDF. So I'm making sure that the two front legs are flat on that MDF, as are those 65-degree angles at the back of the side pieces. I had pre-drilled some pilot holes on my CNC machine to where those bolts go. So I went ahead and finished those off with a hand drill, and then just tapped them in with a rubber mallet. Here I want to point out what I said I was going to try to remember earlier, and see those two bolts on the right. They go towards the back, or they face the back of the chair, and that one single bolt faces the front of the chair. After you've gotten your bolt holes drilled, your bolts lined up, make sure your chair is all flat, then I just went ahead and took things apart, and then put the glue on the side pieces and put the glue on the legs where they would match up, and then went ahead and reassembled it with the bolts so that those legs were bolted and glued to those side pieces. Putting the arm brackets on is pretty straightforward. The task is made much simpler if you pre-drill those holes right there in the center of that of those legs, so that you have a good starting point. Just apply some glue to the legs, apply glue to the bracket, then I ran those screws through the legs until they protruded slightly from the other side of the leg. And here's where you'll use the two 1 1/4 inch screws on the bottom of that bracket there. You'll see that the bracket is much narrower on the bottom than it is on the top, so the bracket won't hold that 1 5/8 inch screw. So you have to use the 1 1/4 inch screw there. Attaching the arms was pretty straightforward. There are only 3 screws that attach the arm to the leg and the arm bracket there. You have to use a 3/4 inch spacer on the inside of the leg, as you can see here, to get the initial alignment. I've already gotten that, and I've pre-screwed those 3 guide holes in there. So all I need to do is just line up those screws with those guide holes and go ahead and attach it. You need to take your time and follow the instructions precisely when you're aligning the attachment of these arms. And the reason why you need to do that is because the next step, we're going to move to the back of the chair. Those arms are going to have to be spaced apart 20.5 inches, and that needs to be pretty accurately installed in order for that to happen. You'll see that in this next segment. Here you see me using the 20.5 inch spacer that I showed you in the first video, getting that upper rear cross piece perfectly centered between those 2 arms. And again, here you have that 30-degree angle on the inside curve of that cross piece, so you want to make sure that that's oriented in the right direction and you don't have it turned around and facing up versus down. That 30-degree angle will correspond perfectly with that 6-degree angle on that lower cross piece when we put those slats on. Once you're satisfied that everything is perfectly centered and it's aligned, you can go ahead and drill the holes for those 1/4 20 bolts. Again, I had pre-drilled the pilot holes in my CNC, so for me that was pretty much a no-brainer. Just went back with the hand drill and finished those holes off. Then took off the cross piece, applied some glue, and then used the bolts to realign the cross piece with the backs of those arms. Tightened up those nuts, and ready to move on to the next step. Now, when attaching these back slats, there's a procedure to follow. First of all, you attach the center back slat, and then you attach the two outer back slats. When you're doing this, there are really only two considerations that you need to be concerned with. The first thing, of course, is to make sure that that center back slat is absolutely centered in between both the upper and lower cross pieces, and you do that through measurement. And then the other thing is drilling the holes into the cross pieces through those back slats is just a little bit tricky. There is an angle there. You can see when I'm drilling here that there is an angle that you have to use, and really that's just an eyeball angle. There's really no way to define that or pre-drill those holes at an angle, a predetermined angle. So that's why I didn't drill those holes on the drill press beforehand. What I did, as you see here, is I've just used two screws to temporarily attach these back slats to those cross pieces with. Usually it's the upper left or lower right screws there and the two cross pieces. And then once I got them all in, got them aligned right, I came back and I took the screws out and applied glue to the pieces, and then reattached them, and so they were screwed and glued. When you're applying the outer back slats, you can let the upper part rest against the arms, and then you move the lower part of that back slat in about I think it's 1 3/4 inches in from the edge of that lower back slat, and that gives it a cant to the outside, and I think is more pleasing to the eye than being just straight up and down. After you install the center back slat and both the outer back slats, then all it takes is just eyeballing where those intermediate back slats go, both on the left and right hand side. I suppose you could measure it. I didn't, just eyeball it. That was good enough. Center them up, drill the holes. Then what I did was I took a pencil and ran the pencil around the back of those back slats so that I could see where they met with the upper and lower cross pieces. Then I unscrewed them, took them off, applied glue to both the cross pieces as well as the back of those back slats, and then reattached them to the chair, and that way ensuring that those were glued and screwed. After getting those back slats installed, the next step was to install those seat slats, and I went ahead and just laid the seat slats on the seat, and then I went in and with my ruler there, I just measured the distance that would be the equal distance in between each one of those slats. Now those seat slats only take one screw on each side, so there's only 2 screws per seat slat because they're so narrow when you put them in. The last thing I want to mention about seat slats before we move on is that because the seat slats are the last procedure in which you'll use your drill, there are some tight spots in there. But really there's no other way to assemble the chair without leaving those seat slats till the last, because if you put the seat slats in first, then they would wind up getting in your way when you were trying to screw those back slats on. So you just got to kind of work around those tight spots the best you can. Now the last and final step, except for the finishing of course, is plugging these holes. I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I plug 5 of them And before we go much further, you're going to see that paper with the glue on it start to slip off the chair. The answer to your question is absolutely yes. It did fall on the ground, but you just won't see it. So those plugs, you just use a screwdriver to dig them out of the wood. Dip them in the glue. Normally you can just use your fingers to press them into those holes there that the screws are in. Just give them a little tap to seat them on top of the head of that screw. And then you come back with a flexible saw and just trim off the tops and sand them down, and then they'll go flush with the edge of the chair. Didn't really have any problems putting the plugs in. Actually, it went a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. But if you do have a hole that just does not accept the plug, you can always take the plug and use a little fine grain sandpaper and just kind of round off the end that you're going to insert into the hole. It goes right in, and then once you tap it, it'll fill out in the hole there.
Well, here we are again, another beautiful morning in the Shenandoah Valley. It's kind of a cool summer morning this morning. I don't even know if it's 60 degrees yet, but I got a little fire going here, another nice hot cup of coffee, and very, very comfortable chair. This chair right here is the finished product of the Adirondack chair that I made. The gentleman next door here let me have some of the cedar, and this is what I made. He was going to burn the cedar. I mean, this chair was going to wind up in a fire like this somewhere else, but now I have a nice chair. I've used, I believe, just about every major system in my shop except for the bandsaw. Let's see, I use the router table, I use the table saw, I use all my sanders, I use the planer, I use my CNC, of course. Integrating that CNC into the workflow in order to come up with a fine project like this chair right here. I'm going to get probably a couple years of use out of this chair, sitting back and enjoying life and thinking about what else I'm going to make next. So we'll catch you on the next video. Until then, thanks a lot for tuning in. See you later.